That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Hello, good evening everyone. I hope you're well. Is there life in Mars? Are we really alone in the universe? We humans are able to create our own fictions. Today's Tuesday. Tuesday in Spanish comes from the god of war, Marte. So we have a little play in words. I know that many of you have already read the book from Yuval Noah Harari, but allow me to read a quote from the book so you understand what we mean. In 1880, Mary Shelley published the book Frankenstein on an artificial being that went out of control and produced a very negative impact in surroundings. Now, technology has become a new pillar of our mythology. That story of Frankenstein seems to tell us that if we try to play God and manipulate life, we will be severely punished. But there's also a deeper meaning in that tale. And that deeper meaning, for which we have tried to find an answer, is in Homo Deus, which is the book that we are here today to present from Yuval Noah Harari. And just bear in mind how curious this is. We're wondering about life in Mars, and then we have this exhibition just next door on monsters from the laboratory. Many things are here that are linked to the contents of the book. The end of our days is approaching. The end of humankind is something we could envisage as the last days of dinosaurs, like an asteroid coming and impacting on Earth. But what happens if the asteroid is ourselves? Like the step from Homo erectus to Homo sapiens? How about we moving to a new era? How about we here believing that we're talking about culture, talking about books, watching this in our streaming channel? What happens if we are really becoming extinct, becoming something else? There are many answers to these questions in Homo Deus. As any good book, it opens up a space for new questions. But the best thing, the best option we have is that Yuval Noah Harari addresses all of us, and please, a round of applause for the author. Thank you.
Thank you. So, hello everybody, and welcome to this talk in which we'll try to say a few things about the future of all of us, the future of humanity, the future actually of life on Earth and even beyond the Earth, because we are now facing the greatest revolution ever in history and in biology. Many of the people here in the room, especially the younger ones, have a good chance of experiencing within their lives the greatest revolution ever in history. Because up till now, for thousands and thousands of years, humans have changed the world outside them, but they did not change the world inside them. We've changed the economy, the political system, the social system. We've changed the geography. We've changed agriculture. We've destroyed forests and mountains and rivers. We changed the ecology, but we did not change ourselves. We did not change the deepest structures of the human body and of the human brain and the human mind. We still today have the same body, the same brain, the same mind that our ancestors had back in the Stone Age. This is why we still feel connected to people hundreds or thousands of years ago. We read the Bible, or we look at art from ancient Egypt, and we can easily connect to it because this art or this text was written, was created by people just like us. with the same body, with the same brain, with the same emotions. This, however, is going to change in the next century or so. The greatest revolution of the 21st century will not be in the outside world, it will be in the world inside us. Of course, there will continue to be many important changes in the economy, in the political system, in the ecological system. But for the first time in history, we will also see a major revolution in humanity itself. We will learn we are already today learning how to engineer, how to manufacture bodies and brains and minds. The main products of the 21st century economy will not be tools and vehicles and weapons and textiles. The main product of the economy will be bodies and brains and minds. And as a result, humans will change, maybe even beyond recognition. So it is fair to say that we are probably one of the last generations of Homo sapiens. In 100 years or 200 years, humans like us will disappear, not in some big catastrophe like in a Hollywood science fiction movie, but rather gradually, because we will change ourselves, we will upgrade ourselves into something which is more different from us than we are different from chimpanzees or from Neanderthals. Usually when people think about the future, like in science fiction, like in Star Trek or films like that, they imagine a distant future in which humans like us enjoy wonderful technology, like spaceship that can travel in the speed of light, or laser guns, or all kinds of intelligent robots. But if you look at the humans in Star Trek or in Star Wars, they're exactly like us. They have the same bodies and brains. They have the same emotional problem. I mean, the whole idea is that they are like us, so this is why we can still connect with their problems, with their conflicts. But this is naive. I mean, this is a bit of lack of imagination on the part of most science fiction movies, because the really big change will not be in the spaceships. The really big change will be in the entities flying in the spaceships. They will be very, very different from us. Now, how is this going to happen? How are we going to change our bodies and our brains and our minds? There are three main ways which we can today see of humans changing themselves, upgrading themselves, and not only themselves, but also other animals, other creatures, other entities. The first way is through what is called biological engineering. Biological engineering starts with the understanding that for 4 billion years, animals, organisms have been constantly changing through the process of natural selection. And this is how we got from amoebas to dinosaurs to giraffes to apes to human beings, by the accumulation of a lot of small changes in the DNA, in the body, in the hormonal system, in the biochemical system. And the idea of biological engineering is to speed it up. We are not at the end of evolution in the same way that we've passed from Homo habilis or Homo erectus, the ancient human species, to Homo sapiens. There is still some way to progress. 100,000 years ago, humans had very similar bodies to our body. They had very similar brains to our brain, yet still they were very insignificant animals with a very small impact on the world. And then, about 70, 80,000 years ago, some small genetic changes in their DNA resulted in some small changes in the internal structure of the brain, and this resulted in amazing new mental and cognitive abilities that transformed humans from insignificant apes that can produce maybe spears and stone tools into the masters of planet Earth that can produce spaceships and atom bombs and computers. So maybe a few more changes in the human DNA can transform Homo sapiens into Homo Deus, divine man, God man, with abilities which go far beyond our own abilities today. And biological engineering is not going to wait millions of years for natural selection to produce these superhumans. The idea is to replace natural selection with intelligent design. Not the intelligent design of some god above the clouds, but our own intelligent design. To start intervening and start changing intentionally the DNA, the hormonal balance, the biochemical system, so as to produce all kinds of new organisms, including new kinds of humans, superhumans. And we are already beginning to do it. Most of the experiments so far are not done on humans for obvious ethical and political reasons. They are done on other animals, but already we are gaining amazing abilities of biological engineering. To give an example of a process which is today routine in many laboratories, we know, for example, how to take a green fluorescent jellyfish, a jellyfish that glows in a fluorescent green light. We know the gene in the jellyfish DNA that is responsible for this quality, glowing in a green fluorescent light. And we can take this gene from the jellyfish DNA and implant it in the DNA of rabbits and monkeys. It's done routinely today in laboratories for all kinds of scientific reasons. So you take the DNA from the jellyfish, you put it in the rabbit, and the rabbit glows in a green fluorescent light. Now you can today do this to humans and they will start glowing in a green fluorescent light. It's not being done for, again, ethical and scientific reasons, but maybe it will become a new fashion, I don't know. And people will start doing it. Technically, it's possible. Now, this is relatively simple because it's a single gene that controls a quality which, even though it may be very interesting, it has no deep impact on life. The idea is that we can do the same to more and more sophisticated genetic mechanisms that are responsible for mental and emotional and cognitive abilities. So this is the first way for humans to create superhumans and to change life using biological engineering. Here, the main idea, the fundamental idea, is to replace natural selection with intelligent design. If this sounds a radical idea, then the next way to change humans and to change life is even more radical. This is the idea of engineering cyborgs and creating direct links or direct interfaces between humans and computers. Biological engineering, you can say, is still very conservative because it remains within the realm of organic biochemistry. For 4 billion years, all life was made of organic compounds, and biological engineering has no has no intention of changing that. Cyborg engineering tries to go further and to start connecting organic bodies with inorganic parts, to start having inorganic, bionic eyes and ears and hands and so forth. And this is not science fiction. This is already being done today, both in experiments on other animals and even to human beings. You have here an image, a real photo. This is not something like a photo montage. It's a real photo of real human beings who have lost their hands in accidents, and they got bionic hands instead. And these bionic hands, what is remarkable about them is that they work in the same basic way that my own organic hands work. When I want to raise my hand, how do I do it? I just think about it. I just want to do it, and my hand rises. So it's the same with these hands. There is a direct connection between the bionic hand and the organic brain of the person. When the person wants to raise his or her hand, electric signals are being sent from the brain, and the computer that controls the bionic hand knows how to recognize and respond to the signals coming from the brain. So the person just thinks, I want to raise my hand, and their hand rises. At present, these bionic hands are still a very, very poor replacement for the organic hands. But whereas organic hands did not change much in the last 100,000 years, bionic hands are being updated every year. In the same way that you update your mobile phone every year or every 2 years, so you can update, you can upgrade your hands to the next model every year or two. And within a short time, bionic hands may outperform organic hands. If you think about the Olympics and the Paralympics, it's expected that within 10 or 20 years, the real records will not be in sports. The real records will not be in the Olympics. They will be in the Paralympics. The Paralympics will become far more interesting and far more, the abilities of humans to run, to swim, to box will be far more impressive in the Paralympics than in the Olympics. So this will be the real event, the Paralympics. And this is just the beginning. I mean, with bionic hands, the opportunities that are opened are far beyond what you can do with organic hands. For example, with organic hands, we are used to the idea that we only have 2 hands, because this is what natural selection gave us, 2 hands. But once you learn how to connect a brain with a bionic hand, there is no limit to the number of hands you can have. You can have 4 hands. You can have 6 hands, like some Indian goddess. And with organic hands, again, we are used to the idea, which was true for millions of years, that if you want to use your hand must be directly connected to your body. My hand is here. This is why I can use it. If it was cut off and placed in another room, I can't use it. But with bionic hand, there is no problem. You don't have to have your hand always connected to your body. I can stand here and talk to you and have 2 pairs of hands back home in my house washing dishes at the same time. There is no essential reason why it must always stay connected. The computer that mediates between the brain and the hand, it can do so through the internet. It can do so even across very long distances. So this is the second way of upgrading humans and of changing the course of life and the course of evolution, engineering cyborgs. Cyborgs are entities, beings, which combine organic with inorganic parts. Now the third way, and again, this is even far more radical. Even cyborg engineering, you can say this is very conservative, this is very old-fashioned, because it still assumes that the central command and control centers of life, of the beings, of the entities, will be the organic brain. Yes, you replace the hands, you replace the eyes, you replace the legs, but the brain, who thinks, who desires, who controls everything, this is still the old-fashioned organic brain that natural selection have shaped in millions of years of evolution. So the most radical way of changing humans and really changing life is to create completely inorganic life forms, to replace even the brain with super intelligent computers or software which are based not on carbon and biochemistry, but are based on silicon and on electricity, and creating completely inorganic entities. If this succeeds, it means that after 4 billion years in which all of life was confined to the organic realm, we will create the first inorganic life forms, and we will effectively break out of life, will break out of the small realm of organic chemistry into the far vaster realm of the inorganic. And if this succeeds, I'm not an expert in biology or in computer science, and there is a lot of disagreement between the experts whether this can actually be done. Can you actually create a completely inorganic life form based on silicon and electricity? Can you upload a human consciousness into a computer? But some experts believe it can be done. And at present, billions of dollars in places like Silicon Valley are invested in projects that assume that this can be done, and can be done within this century, in the 21st century. If this succeeds, it will be not just the greatest revolution in history, it will be the greatest revolution in biology since the very beginning of life. After 4 billion years of evolution, when all life forms were organic, something really new will happen, an inorganic existence. And if this succeeds, another implication is that for the first time, life will be able to break out of planet Earth as well. Despite everything we see in science fiction movies like Star Trek, so far, for 4 billion years, all life forms, including humans, were effectively confined to planet Earth because it is extremely difficult to maintain organic life in outer space or on the moon or on Mars or on other planets. Simply evolution adapted us to the very unique conditions of planet Earth. We are very adapted to this particular planet, which makes it impossible for us to survive on Mars or Jupiter or in other planets. But once you switch from organic life to inorganic life, it becomes much easier. It's much easier to sustain a robot or a computer based on silicon and electricity in outer space or on other planets than it is to sustain organic life. So the realistic hope for exploring outer space and for colonizing other planets depends on succeeding in creating inorganic life forms. Now, another big revolution that may result from all these advances in biotechnology is that for the first time in history, humans will have a serious chance of overcoming old age and death and living indefinitely. Now, humans have been dreaming about living forever from the beginning of history. In all civilizations, in all cultures, humans dreamt about immortality. But for all of history, this remained just a fantasy that humans postponed until after they die. Most religions told people, yes, you will live forever, but after you die. First you have to die, then you go to heaven or to paradise, or your soul is migrates into another body, and this is how you live forever. You can't live forever in this very life, with this very body. But this is now going to change, because science is redefining the very meaning of death. For all of history, death was seen as a metaphysical phenomenon. Why do people die? Because God said so. Because this is the nature of reality. Humans must die. When God created humans, He decreed that they must die, so we must die. There is nothing we can do about it. And you have all these legends and all these mythologies, like in the Middle Ages. People thought, why do we die? Because suddenly the angel of death appears, like you go about your business, and suddenly the angel of death appears, like this figure with a black hood holding a big scythe, and he taps you on the shoulder, and he says, you must come with me. And you say, no, I still have so many things to do. And the death says, no, you must come with me now, and you can't resist the angel of death. So throughout history, people had to become accustomed to the fact that they must die, and to postpone fantasies of immortality to some heaven above the clouds. Now science comes and says, no, death is not a metaphysical phenomenon. Death is a technical problem. Why do people die? They don't die because God said so. They don't die because suddenly the angel of death appears and takes them away. They always die because of some technical problem in the body. The heart stops pumping blood, or the arteries are clogged by fat. And what is the cause of these technical problems? Other technical problems. The heart stops pumping blood because there is some infection or because whatever. And according to science, at least in principle, every technical problem has a technical solution. Maybe we don't know it yet, but if we invest enough time, enough money, we can find the technical solution. And death is being transformed today from a metaphysical or existential phenomena into a technical problem. If previously people expected that we can overcome death only with the help of God, maybe in the second coming of Christ, Christ will overcome death. So now they come and say, oh no, we don't have to wait for God. A couple of geeks in a laboratory can do it. They can overcome death. The engineers are taking over from the priests and from the theologians. And this is not science fiction anymore. This is serious science, and this is also serious economics. Today, in places like Silicon Valley, immortality is one of the hottest topics of discussion. And you have corporations like Google who seriously think about how to overcome old age and death. I think in 2013, 3 years ago, Google established a sub-company called Calico, whose stated aim is to solve death, to overcome the problem of death. We've solved search, and now we'll use our engineers to solve death. So this is becoming not fantasies, but a very serious business. And if this succeeds, then of course it will completely transform the human society, not necessarily always in good ways. Throughout history, death was the great equalizer between poor and rich. No matter what gaps there were between the rich and the poor, everybody had to die in the end. So this was one of the main comforts of poor people. When they saw all the kings and princes in their palaces, they said to themselves, okay, now they have it good, but they're going to die just like us. And after death, they'll get their punishment and will be rewarded. Now think that in 100 years, only the poor will continue to die, but the rich will live on indefinitely, young and beautiful forever. Because most likely, even if science advances in its war against old age and death, it will involve some very expensive treatments which at least at first will not be available for everybody. And this is true not only of the issue of death, but in general, all these advances which I spoke about earlier in biotechnology and computer science and so forth, one of the dangers is that they will result in splitting humankind into biological castes. Up till now, throughout history, there are many differences between the rich and the poor, but all these differences were social and economic and political. They were not biological. There was no real biological difference in physical or mental abilities between the king and the peasant. However, in 50 years or 100 years, given all these advances with genetic engineering and cyborg engineering and so forth, it will be possible for the first time in history to translate economic inequality into biological inequality. The rich could engineer themselves or their children to be smarter, to be more creative, to be more compassionate, more anything than other people. And it's not a prophecy, of course, we don't know for sure what will happen, but there is a danger, there is a possibility that humankind will split into different biological castes. So, as immortality becomes more important, equality will suffer and will become less important. And another danger is that at the same time that you will have this new superhuman elite, the masses of the people will lose their economic and their political power, and we will see the creation of a new massive class, the useless class. People who have no economic importance and therefore also no political power. This could happen because of the rise of artificial intelligence. In order to really understand our bodies and our brains, we need to collect enormous amounts of data and analyze this data. And this is something which is far beyond the capacity of human brains. For these projects to succeed, we need to develop more and more sophisticated artificial intelligence, which is what we are doing right now. But already today, and this will only increase with time, this artificial intelligence that we are developing not only may help us to live longer and healthier lives, but it also outperforms us in more and more jobs and tasks. All kinds of things that up till now only humans could do, computers and artificial intelligence are beginning to do better than us. 10 years ago, it was thought that there is no way a computer and artificial intelligence can drive a car. Maybe under laboratory conditions, it could do it, but not in a real-life situation, in a real city or a real highway. Today, most experts and most car companies expect that within about 10 or 15 years, self-driving cars will replace human drivers because computers will drive not as well as human beings, but much better than human beings. Computers will drive more efficiently, more cheaply, most importantly, more safely. Today, every year, about 1.3 million people die each year in car accidents. That's about twice the number of people who are killed by war, crime, and terrorism put together. And most of these car accidents are caused by human error. The human driver who drinks alcohol and drives, who falls asleep while driving, who texts a message on his mobile phone while driving. This is the cause of most car accidents. Artificial intelligence will solve it. If we give computers to drive the cars, they will never drink alcohol and drive. They will never fall asleep and do an accident. So it is likely that human drivers will be replaced by artificial intelligence, which has many positive consequences, but which also means that millions of taxi drivers and bus drivers and truck drivers will lose their jobs. They will lose their economic power. They will also lose their political power. Today, taxi drivers and bus drivers have some political power. For instance, if the government does something they don't like, they can unionize and go on strike and paralyze the transportation system. So it gives them not only economic power, but also political power. In 15 years or 20 years, all this economic and political power will be concentrated in the hands of a very small number of people who own the corporations, who own the algorithms, who drive all the cars in the city. So you will have, on the one hand, a small elite that concentrates all the power in its hands, and on the other hand, a massive new class of useless people. People who are not just unemployed, they are unemployable. There is nothing to do with them. Now, of course, some new jobs will appear as old jobs disappear, but there are two problems with these new jobs. First of all, there is no certainty that as new jobs appear, humans will be better at the new jobs than the computers. For instance, okay, you don't have jobs as driving taxi, but you need more jobs, for example, in designing artificial worlds for computer games. There are many new jobs designing artificial worlds. But who said that humans will be better than AI in doing the new jobs? And even if humans are better than AI in doing the new jobs, how easy would it be for a 50-year-old taxi driver who learned all his life how to drive a car and how to navigate in the streets of Madrid, and suddenly they tell him, okay, all these skills are no longer necessary. Now, if you want a job, you need to start designing artificial worlds. How is it for a 50-year-old taxi driver to reinvent himself or herself as a designer of virtual worlds? The truth is that nobody really knows what the job market would look like in 20 years or 30 years. The only thing we are certain about is that in 30 years, the job market will be completely different from what it is today. Probably most jobs will be in professions that today don't exist, which also means, and this is especially relevant for the younger people in the audience, that most of what kids learn today in school or students learn in college will be completely irrelevant by the time they are 30 or 40 years old. And we keep teaching it, not because we think it's really going to be useful, but just because we don't have a better idea. We don't know what kind of skills, what kind of knowledge you will need in order to survive and have a good job in 2040. So this is a very big problem already today. And what is really important about this example, there are many other dangers which are posed by the new technologies. But the most important message is to understand that all these new technologies will have social and political and economic consequences. And it's vital to start talking about the social and political implications of these new technologies already today. Even people who don't like computers, and even people who don't know anything about biology, you don't need a PhD in computer science for that. You need to start thinking today about the social and political and economic implications of these new technologies, because they will shape the world of tomorrow, the world of 20 years, 30 years from now, more than anything else. And I think part of the reason why people today are losing their trust in governments and, for example, are voting for anti-establishment figures like Donald Trump or like Brexit in the UK and so forth, is because people understand correctly that the governments are becoming irrelevant and that they have no realistic vision for the future of humankind. In the 20th century, politics was a battleground between huge visions about the future of humankind. You had the communist vision, you had the fascist vision, you had the liberal vision, and politics was all about this battle between different visions for the future. In the 21st century, no political party has any relevant vision for the future of humankind. Where will we be in 20 years or 40 years with the rise of artificial intelligence and biotechnology? Governments are really today just managers. They stopped being leaders. Leaders are people who look to the future, try to envision how the world would look like in 20 years, 30 years, what kind of society we would like to have in 30 years. Governments are no longer doing it. They are mere managers. They focus on managing the day-to-day business of the country, and they leave the future of humankind really to market forces and to corporations. If you want to hear serious visions about where humankind will be in 30 years, you don't hear such visions in Washington or in Moscow. You need to go to places like Silicon Valley. This is where people really think creatively and seriously about the future of humankind. To end this talk and give some time for questions and for comments, I would like to emphasize that everything I've said, and also everything in the book, in Homo Deus, these are not prophecies. These are just possibilities. I'm not trying to predict the future. It's utterly impossible. I'm just trying to map different possibilities. In the 1950s and 1960s, when people looked to the future, they imagined this was the heyday of nuclear energy and the space age with the landing of on the moon and so forth. So people in the 1950s and 60s imagined that by the year 2000, we humans will live on Mars and Jupiter in colonies that are powered by nuclear energy. Nothing happened out of all these visions. Instead, we got the internet, which is in many ways far more remarkable and powerful than colonies on Mars. Yet nobody envisioned the internet in the 1950s and 1960s. So also today, when we try to imagine the world of 2050, we have to take all these scenarios and forecasts not as prophecies, but just as possibilities. Maybe it will happen, maybe it will not happen. And we also need to understand that technology is never deterministic. You can use the same technology to create completely different kinds of human societies. In the 20th century, the new technologies of electricity and radio and television and cars and airplanes, you could use them to create a communist dictatorship, like in the Soviet Union. You could use them to create a fascist regime, like in Nazi Germany, or you could use them to create a liberal democracy. The trains, the cars, the electricity did not tell you what to do with them. It's the same with the new technologies of the 21st century. Biotechnology, artificial intelligence, and so forth. They give us different possibilities. And if you are frightened by some of the possibilities, like humankind dividing into a master race of superhumans and a huge class of useless people, if you are frightened by it, you can still do something about it. The one thing which is certain about the world of the 21st century is that we will see a dramatic revolution, not only in the world outside us, but in the world inside us. We don't know exactly how it will happen. We don't know exactly what the consequences will be. But in the coming century, we are going to start changing our bodies and our brains and our minds in a more radical way than in any previous time in history, which is why I think it's very likely that we are one of the last generations of Homo sapiens, and that within a century or two, Homo sapiens will disappear and be replaced by a completely different kind of entities. Whether these entities will be better than us or worse than us, this is an open question. Thank you.
Bueno, muchísimas gracias, Yuval.
Thank you very much indeed. Let me take the opportunity to remind you about a number of things whilst we take our time to change the layout. First thing, despite it's a Thursday, our hashtag today is Live on Tuesdays or Live on Mars. And since technology is changing us, it is also changing the way we participate in this type of events. The way to participate is through Twitter. So you may ask any type of questions, but some things haven't changed. And today is a Thursday, and we have Enrique Flores. Enrique Flores is an amazing cartoonist. He's got a couple of bionic arms at home, washing the dishes, but his organic hands he's using here today, in this very room, to leave a testimony of our talk. So we see the audience listening carefully to Mr. Harari, and we have the images of the impact of this talk. I think it has been made quite clear through his book, in Homo Deus, if there is something constant in the world, is that everything changes. But it seems that we never change. And we don't notice, we don't realize how the world is changing, how we are changing ourselves, and how at the end, with our dear Homo erectus that was replaced by Homo sapiens without them ever noticing, we could be replaced ourselves by Homo Deus. So should Homo sapiens, I'm wondering, should Homo sapiens disappear? And when I say disappear, I say die or mutate to save humankind?
Well, as I try to explain, when we talk about Homo sapiens disappearing, we shouldn't think about it in terms of a Hollywood science fiction movie that the robots are rebelling and killing everybody, like in the Terminator. It's not so much that we'll have to fight against the machines. It's much more likely that we'll merge with them. We are not talking about a war, we are talking about a wedding. The machines will make Homo sapiens disappear, not by killing it, but by merging with it and creating completely new kinds of entities. I'll give another example to the ones I gave in the talk. I mentioned the ability to connect brains directly to computers. So you could use your brain to control a bionic arm. If scientists and engineers really solve this technical problem of how to connect a brain to a computer directly, one of the things you could do is to connect several brains directly to each other through one computer. And that means that, for example, I can communicate with you directly, not by voice, but just transmitting thoughts directly from my brain to your brain. That could mean potentially that I could gain access to your memories directly. If I want to know about your childhood, I don't need to ask you about it. I don't need for you to write an autobiography. I can access your memories directly. Now, what does it mean? Nobody has the slightest idea. If we indeed gain such ability, the very definition of human identity collapses. Because if I can have this access to your memories in the same way that I have access to my memories, then the difference between me and you disappears. And then personal identity or gender identity becomes an obsolete concept. So this is what I and other scientists mean when we speak about the disappearance of Homo sapiens. It's more weddings and war. and it's not a complete annihilation, but such a dramatic change that whatever appears on the other side is no longer Homo sapiens, it's something else.
Yuval Noah Harari lo explica muy bien, lo ha explicado muy bien.
Yuval Harari is very skillful explaining it in the talk, explaining it in the book. He is very skillful at explaining that this is not science fiction. This is a romance that we have with technology, which is indeed happening already. There was at a certain point during his talk, I heard him saying that we read books that we don't realize that e-books are reading us, and they will start doing it better and better. And this is an example of our daily life when we use our e-reader. We're not aware of that.
For all of history, I read a book, and the book did nothing. It was just there. Now, the book starts reading me at the same time that I'm reading it. Already today, if you read a book on Kindle, you should know that Kindle is reading you when you are reading it. Today, it's still very simple. Kindle knows how fast you read each page. So some pages you read very fast, some pages you read slow, and Kindle knows when you stop reading and turn the device off. And this gives Kindle, which means Amazon, some insight about who you are, what you like, what you don't like. Very soon, we could connect Kindle to applications that already exist that can recognize emotions by analyzing facial expressions. When you're bored and when you're angry and when you're happy, your face looks a bit different. You have different muscle movements. If you give Kindle this application, this ability, then the book will know when you laugh, when you cry, when you're angry, when you're bored. And within 10 or 20 years, you could do something even more remarkable, which is connect Kindle to biometric sensors on your body or in your body. They already exist in some form, like you can buy a Microsoft armband, you wear it on your wrist, and it constantly measures your heart rate, your blood pressure. You have biometric sensors that already today constantly measure the level of sugar in your blood. It's used by diabetics. If you connect this to Kindle, it means that as you read the book knows the exact emotional impact of every sentence you read. You read a sentence and the book knows whether you're angry, whether you're bored, whether you're fearful, anything. And by the time you finish reading the book, you forget most of what you've read. This is usually the case. But the book will never forget anything, which means Amazon will never forget anything. By the time you finish reading, I don't know, Tolstoy's War and Peace, you forgot most of it. But Amazon will know exactly who you are, what is your personality type, and how to press your emotional buttons, which will give it immense power over you.
Ya que estamos con una pregunta de...
And since we are talking about literature, I remind you that it's a hashtag, Life on Mars. This is a question that was sent through Twitter. It comes from Marlo Sara Casanova. He's asking, will there be room for art in that future of technology?
There will certainly be room for art, even more important than in any previous time in history, because art shapes our fantasies. And in the future, our fantasies will be much more powerful than today. In the past, our fantasies, which again often comes from art, influenced our behavior, but there was a limit to what you could do with your fantasies. You fantasize about living forever, you can't do it. You have to postpone it until after you die and you go to heaven. You have a fantasy about living in another body, about being an eagle, about a man has a fantasy about being a woman, can't be done. You can just do it in your imagination. In the 21st century, you can actually do it. You'll have the technology, using biotechnology or using computer technology to create three-dimensional virtual realities, which will enable you to realize your fantasies to an extent far beyond any previous time in history, which means that your fantasy will be far more important because they shape reality. And what shapes our fantasy? Art, to a large extent, is what shapes our fantasies, our desires. But it doesn't mean that art will remain just something that humans do. Artificial intelligence may be able to produce better art than us. By knowing us better than we know ourselves, again, if you think about Amazon, that collects all this information about when you read the book, using all this information, the Amazon algorithms may be able to write books which will be far more effective and powerful in pressing the emotional buttons of the readers than any human author. When I write a book and I try to scare my readers, or I try to make my readers laugh, so I write and I try to imagine how the readers will react. And very often I get it wrong. Like especially with irony, this is the worst thing. Like I write something ironic and then people take it literally. And they don't understand that I meant it as irony. Now, artificial intelligence could be much better than me because it doesn't need to imagine what will be the emotional impact of writing this sentence or writing that sentence. By constantly following millions of people as they read books, it will know the exact emotional impact of what it is writing. So even with irony, it could get irony better than a human author.
Ha mencionado Harari una de las...
Mr. Harari, you've mentioned one of the fundamental words in Homo Deus. You've talked about algorithms and how algorithms can explain things to us. Because in Homo Deus, you also tell us that we tend to believe that we have emotions and emotions are superior. So emotions are connected to creativity, to art, but emotions by themselves are useless for survival, let's say, or for evolution.
I wouldn't say that emotions are useless. Until today, emotions were vital for the survival of animals, not just humans. People sometimes imagine that emotions are some spiritual phenomena that God gave only humans in order to appreciate poetry or write music. And this is not true. Science today tells us that emotions are the result of natural selection. Emotions evolved over millions of years, not only in human beings. All mammals, all birds, and at least some reptiles and fish and octopuses probably have emotions. And they are vital for survival and reproduction because the way that mammals process information and make decisions is by emotions. If a baboon in the African savannah sees that there are bananas on a nearby tree, but there is also a lion nearby, and the baboon needs to decide whether he risks his life for the bananas or not, the way he decides it is through emotions. The emotions of fear and courage and lust and so forth, they are what enables the baboon to make the right decision. And similarly, certainly in the case of mammals, the emotion of love between mother and offspring is the basis for survival in all mammals, whether it's cows or dolphins or porcupines. They can't survive without the emotion of love between mother and offspring, because all mammals, when they are very young, they live on the milk of the mother. If there is no emotional bond between the mother and the offspring, the young will not survive.
Vamos a ver cómo continúan los...
Let's see what sort of comic strips we see from Enrique, because Enrique is collecting, he's gathering all the details or the concepts that we are talking about, what Mr. Harari is explaining. Let me remind you that the hashtag to pose any questions is Vida Marte. Those of you following us from the streaming channel, this is a question from a friend. He's a writer, Maxim Huerta, in Spain. He's asking, we will lose oral language Is the icon that we use, the emojis that we use in the smartphones, the first step to the disappearance of the verbal language that we use today?
It's difficult to say, but certainly communication and language will change. As I mentioned earlier, there is a possibility that humans could start communicating directly, mind to mind, without using either images or words, just using thoughts in the mind. Some scientists call it the interbrain net. Now we have the internet, which connects computers. But in 50 years or 100 years, we might have the interbrain net, which connects brains directly to one another. And then everything we know about communication completely changes. And this is not a completely new development. You can say that for thousands of years, humans have been moving from chimpanzees to ants. Originally, humans were basically just like chimpanzees, and they relied mainly on their own individual abilities in order to survive and reproduce. You need to know how to do almost everything by yourself. How to get food, how to get shelter, how to protect against enemies, and so forth. You rely on yourself. As history evolved, and communication evolved, and verbal communication evolved, and then writing evolved, so humans became less like chimpanzees and more like ants, living in a big colony and depending on other individuals for more and more things. Today, I don't know how to do most of the things that I need for survival. I don't know how to get my food, I don't know how to make clothes, I don't know how to build a house. I just know how to write history books, and I get money for that. And I take the money, I go to the supermarket and I buy bread. I have no idea how to make bread. I mean, how do you grow wheat? How do you grind it? How do you bake it? I don't know. Or how do you make shirt? I don't know how to make shirt. I know how to go to the supermarket and buy it. And this will only accelerate. So as communication becomes more and more direct and omnipresent, the end result is that we might completely lose our individuality and will be able to exist only as small parts within a huge network.
Ya sabéis que mientras
You know that words we all speak using, we ask using this hashtag. I don't need to ask questions because I'm sitting here, but we have guests in the room that are privileged. They have a microphone, and they are privileged because they're very young, and they're eager to pose questions to Mr. Harari. Well, and what's even more, when he was mentioning during his talk, the challenge of education, how we will teach the young people of today about the future, because we don't have the parameters, we don't have the paradigm. Fernando was opening his eyes, wide open. He was saying, what a big truth. Oh, this is such a big truth. We're learning so many things today. So, a paradox. I know for a fact that you have a question. I think it's Andrea with the microphone. So she's the first one. So let's yield the floor to her.
Speak in English? No. Well, this is about education too. So, for example, you go to school and you learn what a cell is. And if you want to create artificial life, when you go to college, every single teacher you have is just going to assume that you know what a cell is. Mm-hmm. So you just said that we don't know where the future is going, how the future is going to be, or where it's going to teach us or something. Mm-hmm. So shouldn't we learn the basics of everything so we all get prepared for everything? Doesn't matter how it goes.
Well, it would be good to learn the basis of everything, but you don't have enough time and energy to do it. The big question in education is to prioritize. It's like, like the government has a budget. It would be good to give money for everything, but there is a limited amount of money. Or like in a newspaper, it would be good to write about everything, but there is a limited number of pages in the newspaper and a limited time for the readers. So you have to choose what is really important. And in education, you all the time have to make these choices. What is really important that we must teach this to the students? And at present, the problem is we don't know. It would be good to teach biology and history and this and that, but what will really be necessary for people to survive in 2040, 2050? Maybe you don't need mathematics, because whenever you encounter some mathematical problem, your brain is connected to a computer or to a mobile phone. It gives you all the answers. Like 30 years ago in school, people had to memorize logarithmic tables. And people thought, this is very important. If you don't know logarithmic tables, how will you be able to work as a bank clerk? But today, nobody needs these logarithmic tables because the computer does everything. So we don't have the ability to really prioritize. My bet or my gamble is that the most important thing for young people to learn in school or college is emotional intelligence, emotional resilience, the ability to cope with change, the ability to keep reinventing yourself again and again and again, because this is what you'll need to do in your life. Previously in history, the model of life was that life is divided into two main parts. When you're young, you mostly learn. You acquire skills and knowledge. And then when you're older, you mostly work. You make use of the skills and knowledge you gathered as a young person. This is no longer relevant. Because again, by the time you're 40, most of what you have learned is irrelevant. And if you want to have a job when you're 40, you need to start all over again to learn something completely new. And this is very, very difficult. Because when you're 15 years old, it's still very difficult to invent yourself, but this is what young people do. They basically invent themselves. They create a personality. Their body is changing all the time. Their mind is changing all the time. They can't stand in one place. They all the time have to cope with change. They all the time have to get to know who I am, what am I doing in the world. This is the really big project of young people, is to cope with change, to understand themselves and their identity. And you build an identity, you build a career, you build a personality. And then when you get older, when you become 40 or 50, you no longer want to change. You invested so much effort and time and energy in building an identity, in building a career, in building a personality. You don't want to change. And until today, you didn't have to change. You can stay as you are, so maybe the young people will joke about you that you're very old-fashioned, but it was okay. It won't be okay in 2050. If you remained old-fashioned in 2050, you just can't, you'll be utterly irrelevant. You won't be able to have a job, you won't be able to survive. So, what to teach children today so that in 2050 they'll have the ability to cope with change and keep changing all the time? This is the big question, and I don't think we have an answer to this question.
Claro, es muy difícil tener estas respuestas a las
Yes, it is very difficult to have the answers to these questions regarding the future, because Harari explains in Homo Deus that there is a problem of perspective. In many cases, we analyze the past with our present perspective, but the problem is that we do that with the future, and we analyze future with with our present perspective, without opening the mind to the fact that maybe everything is different, or maybe we are different. How the teacher can do that, how we can do that.
muy complicado.
Yeah, it's very, for a teacher, if I need to teach, students about the Roman Empire, so I know how to do it. Like teach them about the social system of the Roman Empire, or why the Roman Republic collapsed and an empire was created instead. But again, to teach the students how to change their perspective constantly, how not to become stuck with a particular understanding of the world because it's going to become irrelevant. This is much more difficult. I mean, mostly in schools, especially the teachers, but also the students, they have this image that you have a question and the question has an answer. And the teacher asks the question and the students have to find the right answer. And when they find the right answer, wonderful. And if they don't find the right answer, so the teacher will tell them the right answer. And this is a very problematic perspective for the future, because even if there is a right answer now, by the time you're 40, it will change. So if school teaches you that every question has one right answer and you need to know the right answer, then you're learning the wrong lesson.
Los que sé yo que tienen las preguntas adecuadas hoy son nuestros martianos.
Well, those having the right answers and the right questions are our Martians here.
You have talked about the importance of subjective elements. Would Homo Deus don't have the necessity of answering questions like who we are and what's the objective of our lives, and he won't have the necessity of answer who or what created us? They will know it. Will that end up in anarchy or chaos?
There won't necessarily be anarchy. I mean, people often fear that if our current beliefs, people stop believing in them, there will be anarchy and everybody will murder everybody else and so forth. For many centuries, for example, in Europe, the Christian church taught people that if you stop believing in God, not only you go to hell after you die, but you will have anarchy. If you don't believe in God and you don't believe in the Bible, so why not murder and steal and rape? You'll have anarchy. And over the last century, people stopped believing in God and stopped believing in the Bible, and you don't have anarchy. Actually, you have a far more peaceful and harmonious society, at least in most parts of Europe, than ever before. The murder rate today is far lower than in the Middle Ages, when everybody supposedly believed in God. And if you compare, let's say even today, you compare a place like Syria or Iraq, where most people still believe in God, to a place like the Netherlands or Sweden or Spain, when a very large, a significant part of the population doesn't believe in God, it's far more peaceful in Spain or in Sweden than it is in Syria or Iraq. So we shouldn't be afraid that just by losing our old beliefs, the result will be anarchy. Humans have the capacity to adapt, to change. We probably will need new ideologies, new religions. We cannot maintain a society without any religion, without any ideology, without any ethical system. This is true. But it doesn't mean we have to hold on to the current system of belief. We can develop and create a new one, which might even be better.
Vamos a ir con una pregunta del hashtag Vida.
Let's go to a question of the hashtag. People who are watching us by streaming. Elena Alfaro asks how these so deep changes are going to affect human psychology in case they are produced.
Well, they are going to change human psychology in a fundamental way, which today we cannot predict or understand. As I said in the talk, human psychology changed a little, but not in a fundamental way during history. There is no essential difference in the deep psychological structure of humans between humans today and humans in the time of the Bible or in the Stone Age. We still have the same basic psychology. We may have 21st century technology, but we still have Stone Age emotions. And this is exactly what will change in the coming century. We'll start using the 21st century technology to change the Stone Age emotions in ways today we cannot predict.
En the
question of Elena Alfaro's question and in your talk, Mr. Harari, there is a term that has been repeated: quick, fast. So all this is extremely fast. It's taking place extremely fast. We don't notice that, realize that.
Yes, I mean, the crucial thing is how fast it is happening. If it took thousands of years, then it won't have much of an impact on the lives of people today. I mean, it would be interesting to know that in 4,000 years you will have artificial intelligence or cyborgs, but it doesn't have an impact on our life. However, because it's going to happen within 40 years, 50 years, it's already a very important issue today, for example, with education. And of course, it's not going to happen in 40 years. It's a gradual process. It's already beginning to happen today. Not because, some big government is forcing us to do it. It's choices and decisions that each one of us is taking on a daily basis. Each one of us, every day, decides to give more authority to the mobile phone or to the computer to make decisions for me. Each one of us decides every day to share more and more data about myself with other people and with big corporations like Amazon or like Facebook. Nobody is forcing us to do it. Maybe the most important asset that people today have is their personal data. And they are willingly giving it for free to Amazon and Facebook and Google and so forth in exchange for email services and funny cat videos. Nobody is forcing you to do it, but we are doing it, and this results in a lot of power being accumulated by these corporations, which already know us better than we know ourselves. So this is not something that will suddenly happen in 40 years. It's already happening today, and it's happening because of decisions that we make.
Para que luego digáis que los vídeos de gato.
Well, now say that cute cat videos are not a sign of apocalypse. Well, let's see about the drawings, Enrique Flores' drawings. Please, can you draw a cute cat? Well, in the next one, there will be a cute cat. Anyway, Fernando has the micro, so I'm giving him the floor.
About education a lot, so I want to ask you something about it. As a historian, I hope the answer is yes, but do you really think that studying history is helpful for us, and how can it help us to study history for this unknown future, for this uncertain future?
So yes, the answer is yes. It can be very helpful. I think the main advantage of studying history is not the ability to predict the future. This is impossible. It's the ability to free ourselves, to liberate ourselves from the conditioning of the past. Each one of us is born into a particular society, into a particular economic system, and we are, from childhood, being conditioned by the particular religion, ideology, economic system that prevails in our society. And it shapes our thoughts, it shapes our desires, it shapes the way we view the world. And it becomes very difficult to view the world in any different way and to think in fresh ways. Like if you're born in a capitalist world, then even if you don't want to, you adopt a capitalist worldview. and it becomes extremely difficult to think in any other way. You think, oh, this is just natural. This is the only thing I know. History can help us liberate ourselves to some extent from this conditioning and think and act in more creative and more in fresh ways. Because when you study, for example, the history of capitalism, you understand how this economic system was developed, how it became powerful, how it spread over the world. You realize it is not natural, it is not eternal, it is the outcome of particular conditions. If the conditions change, then we can create a very different economic system. So this, I think, is the main advantage of studying history. And it's true not only on the collective level, it's also true on the individual level. Like you ask yourself, who am I? And people like teachers or parents, they tell you a story about who you are. Maybe they tell you, okay, you are Christian. They tell you you're Spanish. They tell you you're a consumer. And you think, oh, this is who I am. I'm a Christian, I'm Spanish, I'm a consumer. This defines who I am. But actually, these are stories invented by humans. This is not the reality. And if you study the history of Christianity, of nationalism, of consumerism, you, to a certain extent, liberate yourself from these stories, and you can go beyond them. You can understand, okay, it doesn't necessarily identify who I am. I can be something else. Because these are just stories invented by humans. So it doesn't solve all the problems, of course, but I think it does give you some more freedom to think and to act in new ways.
Bueno, ahora que hemos llegado a la conclusión de
Now we have come to the conclusion that histories and cats know. Who gets the microphone?
Stronger than in the Stone Age, but less happier. And that makes me think about what you've been talking about in your talk. And I wonder if maybe the human race to reach immortality is nothing but insatisfaction with we have now, right now. And what do you think? Do you think we as people, we really want to live more and more till 170 years? Do you really want to live forever?
Well, that depends on what you actually mean by forever. Most people, I think all people, can't really imagine what forever means. So when people speak about immortality, they don't imagine that scientists will invent a pill, that you take the pill and you live to be 1,000,000. This is impossible, and also few people will actually want to do it, because you don't understand what does it mean to live to be 1,000,000. But if they come to you and they tell you, do you want to live another 10 years in good health? The vast majority of people will say, yes, I want to live another 10 years in good health. And when these 10 years are over, and they again come to you and say, do you want to live another 10 years in good health? Most people will say yes. And like this, another 10 years and another 10 years. And every 10 years, you will go to the clinic and you'll have these rejuvenation treatments. Or you'll replace your bionic hands and your bionic eyes with the next model, the latest model of hand. And this is how you will escape old age and death, if you have enough money, 1 decade at a time. And I think most people will want that. And most people will be willing to pay a lot of money and to give up even a lot of liberties in order to get that. There is a lot of discussion today about the issue of privacy, of people losing their privacy. I think that in the 21st century, one of the big battles will be between privacy and health. You will get this deal, this offer. We can extend your life. We can keep you healthy and young and beautiful, provided you give up your privacy. Why? Because in order to keep you healthy and young and beautiful, we need to monitor your body 24 hours a day. We need to put biometric sensors on your body and inside your body, which constantly measure your heart rate, your blood pressure, which constantly look for abnormalities, maybe a new disease, maybe cancer is beginning. And you need to allow us to share this information and to compare your data with the data of millions of other people. Because if we don't do that, we cannot know whether you're becoming sick, whether you are developing cancer or something like that. So if you give up your privacy, if you allow Google or Facebook or the government to monitor your body, your brain 24 hours a day, in exchange, we can protect you against cancer, against Alzheimer, against dementia, and so forth. And I think most people, when they are given this choice between privacy and health, they will choose health.
But this Homo Deus that can be immortal, this is the word you use, this new species that can have many birthdays, having good health and being beautiful, have to face the demographics, the demographic problem. So how can we save the planet, or should we have to send it to the stars like the bioorganic intelligence?
Well, one of the things that is happening all over the world is that birth rate is dropping sharply. If you look at the most advanced countries like Japan, Japan is 20 years ahead of the rest of the world in almost everything, so they are also ahead in this, and they basically stopped having babies. They live longer and longer, and they have more and more sophisticated robots and technology, and they don't have babies, or they have fewer and fewer of them. But on a more serious note, definitely one of the biggest problems in the 21st century is going to be the ecological problem. We are currently really destroying the ecological system. And even though we know it, we don't really do anything about it. I mean, you hear a lot of talk about climate change and global warming, and you have conferences and you have agreements like in Paris last December. But when you actually look at human behavior, and when you actually look at the agreements, nothing is being done. Even the Paris Agreement is really an agreement to do something in 10 years, to do something in 20 years, not today. Because at least with present-day technology, the only real chance of stopping global warming is to stop economic growth. And there is no government on earth which can stop economic growth and stay in power. If a democratic government stops economic growth, it will lose the next elections. If an authoritarian government, like in China, stops economic growth, they will have a revolution tomorrow morning. So unless, again, technology is the problem, technology can be part of the solution. Unless we develop new technologies, then the destruction of the ecological system is almost guaranteed. But to end on a more positive note, I would say that technology also gives us options. For example, one of the worst sources of pollution and global warming today in the world is the meat and dairy industry. People sometimes don't realize it because they think agriculture, it's, farms in nature, it's very green, but no, it's actually one of the biggest sources of pollution and of climate change. And technology gives us a choice. We can use biotechnology, for example, to do terrible things to animals, like design, engineer cows which grow faster, which have more meat, which give more milk, completely disregarding the emotions and the suffering of the cow. And we can use biotechnology to create what is called cultured meat, which is no science fiction, it's already done, to grow meat from cells without any need of cows. Even people who like to eat meat, They want a steak. They want a hamburger. They don't need a cow. If you can provide them a hamburger without a cow, that will be okay with them, I think. And I think it was last year that the first hamburger grown from cells was manufactured, was engineered. It cost about $300,000, but it was just the first. It's like the first computer cost millions and millions of dollars, and today you have much better computers that cost a few pennies. So if we decide, for example, to invest in developing cultured meat, we can solve at the same time both many ecological problems and many ethical problems, because we will save billions of cows and pigs and chickens from a horrendous existence in farms. So this is the way in which technology can, if we make the right choices, can help us create a better world, a better society.
Enrique Flores, no te quejarás que estamos hablando de...
Enrique, you can't complain. We're talking about all sorts of things. You have all sorts of subjects to draw about. I don't know how the microphone is doing. Natalia has it.
I'm going to ask you in Spanish, so keep the... Sorry, I didn't have time to translate it. En el libro...
In the book, in your first book, you said that humans are gods that created ourselves as such. And part of that creation would have that paradox, like the Frankenstein's paradox, I think you called it. My question is, what would that interaction be between Frankenstein and gods that created themselves? How would they interact with each other? I can't imagine that.
Well, they are not really two different things. The myth of Frankenstein is the myth of humans becoming gods and creating themselves. When we talk about humans becoming gods, and the title of the book is Homo Deus, God-man or divine man, this is not meant as kind of a mythological metaphor. It is meant literally that humans are really acquiring divine abilities, especially the ability to create life. And so it's not that Frankenstein is one thing and Homo Deus is a different thing. They are the same. And the myth of Frankenstein, which was created in the 19th century, talks about the dangers inherent in acquiring divine abilities of creation. Because once you become a god, and we are in the process of becoming gods, you can't rely on anybody else to save you if you make a mistake. In traditional mythologies, when humans make mistakes, in the end, God intervenes to save the day. So God limits the power of humans. They cannot go beyond a certain point. They cannot, for example, live forever. In all mythologies, there are stories about people who wanted to live forever and they never succeed. But at the same time, God also takes responsibility for the world and saves us if we make a very big error, a very big mistake. And we need to understand that in the 21st century, we are now the gods, and there is nobody out there above the clouds either to limit our power or to save us if we make a mistake. So we need to be far more responsible than we have been so far. If we make a big mistake, we can destroy not only ourselves, but most of life. Now, personally, I tend to be somewhat more optimistic about the ability of humankind to face this Frankenstein challenge. And I think the best example we have is nuclear weapons and nuclear energy. When nuclear weapons appeared in the 1940s, many people, artists and scientists and ordinary people, they had a very pessimistic view that this is really the beginning of the end, that sooner or later humankind will destroy itself in some nuclear catastrophe. This was the Frankenstein story of the 1950s and 60s, that we created this monster, nuclear weapons, and this will eventually destroy us. And I don't know about the future, of course, it can still happen. But as of 2016, we can congratulate ourselves as a species that we have managed to rise to the challenge. Not only we avoided nuclear war and avoided destruction, but in reaction to the threat of nuclear war, we actually managed to change the international system and to reduce the level of violence to the lowest level since the beginning of recorded history. There is still violence in some parts of the world. I come from Israel, so I know it very well. But there is much less violence than any time before in history. In particular, since 1945, because of nuclear weapons, there has not been any military conflict between superpowers. Previously in history, every 20 or 50 years, you would have this big war between the superpowers of the day, between Germany and Britain, between Spain and France, or whatever. Since 1945, you did not have a single case of the major superpowers fighting against each other. And this is really thanks to nuclear weapons. So I hope that in the same way humankind managed to rise to the challenge of nuclear weapons, will also be able to rise to the new challenges presented by biotechnology and artificial intelligence.
La verdad es que la tecnología está muy bien, pero cuando...
The truth is that technology is cool, but when you get a message telling you that it's 8:52, pose the last question, I don't like that message, but we're running out of time. So Mr. Harari explains in one of the chapters, we cannot put a brake on things, but he also explains that predictions can be useful for us to think about things that can happen and change them. This is what the book does.
Yes, I mean, the whole idea of the book is not to try and prophesize the future, but to make people aware of the processes that are already beginning, of the different possibilities that we are facing, so that people will start acting and thinking and acting about these possibilities to make sure that the worst possibilities are not realized and that we use technology for good and not for bad. I don't think there is any point in trying to really predict the future because it's impossible. Nobody knows how the world would look like in 50 years. It's changing too quickly. And if you could make a prophecy which will be 100% correct, it will be useless because then you can't change anything. So I think the job of scholars, intellectuals, thinkers is not to try and predict the future, but to map the different possibilities, the different processes, and to bring them to the attention of the public. So we will start a serious public debate and a serious political debate about these questions in order to make sure that we use technology to create a better society and not a worse society.
You are probably wondering, there's a question from Irene. She's still holding the microphone, and we'll yield the floor to her.
After reading your book, I feel that our future is going to be a bit dystopian and dark. As youth and the next generation, what can we do to avoid it? What can we do to avoid the future?
The future.
Well, in the book, it's true that I focus on some of the darker possibilities, because I think this is part of the responsibility of scientists and scholars. If we just go around saying, oh, everything will be wonderful, then people don't do anything about it. And I think it's our job to, first of all, warn people against the more dangerous possibilities, to make sure that we are aware of them and that we try to prevent them. What can we do about preventing these dark futures from being realized? I think the first two tasks of everybody, and especially young people and also especially the political system, is to, first of all, be aware of what is happening on the frontiers of science and technology. I think one of the biggest problems today in the world is that the political system is not aware of what is happening on the frontiers of science and technology. And it is therefore losing touch with reality, and it is losing the ability to direct the future of humankind. And this is the first and foremost responsibility of the political system. People in Silicon Valley are aware of the remarkable developments in artificial intelligence or biotechnology, and they are thinking about the implications, and it's good that they are thinking about the implications. But it's dangerous when the only people who think about it are private businesses who don't represent anybody. Then nobody voted for Facebook or Google or Amazon. It's really the job of the political system to do the same, to become familiar with developments in fields like artificial intelligence and biotechnology, to understand the potential implications and to start a serious political debate about what do we want to do with these new technologies. And at present, I'm afraid it's not being done. Like, as I said earlier, you watch the debates today in the United States between Clinton and Trump, and they talk about 20th century stuff. They talk about immigration, they talk about race, which is important, of course, but they don't talk at all about biotechnology and artificial intelligence. They talk about, for example, jobs. Donald Trump is frightening people that the Chinese will take your jobs. He doesn't frighten people, the computers will take your jobs. And this is a far greater danger to the American job market than the Chinese. Probably he and his voters are not aware of the developments in artificial intelligence. Similarly, they don't seem to be aware of the dangers of climate change and what we can or should do about it. And this worries me very much. So I think the first thing to do is to turn these issues from a scientific debate and a debate among a small number of entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley, to turn it into a political debate among the general public. The second important thing for every individual, I think, is to, and this is a very, very old advice, maybe the oldest advice of all, to get to know yourself better, and in particular, to get to know what you want from life. Because if you really know who you are and what you want from life, then this gives you a very stable ground, a very stable center. And when all kinds of new technologies come along, if you really know who you are and what you want, you can use the new technologies for your own aims. If you don't know who you are and what you want from life, then there is a very big danger that you will allow the new technologies to dictate to you your aims in life. Instead of using technology for your goals, you will be used by technology for its goals. So again, this is the oldest advice in the book, but I think it's more relevant than ever before, really to get to know yourself. And it's more relevant than ever before because maybe for the first time in history, you have serious competition. In ancient Greece or ancient India, when Socrates and Buddha told people, get to know yourself, who you really are, there wasn't much competition. Nobody else was in a position to know you. Now there is competition. Amazon and Facebook and Google, they are getting to know you much better than you know yourself. It's a competition. If we reach a point in which Facebook knows you better than you know yourself, then you lose control of your life, you lose authority. Authority will shift away from you to the Facebook algorithm. So you have to be faster and smarter than the Facebook algorithm. You have to get to know yourself better than Facebook knows you.
Bueno, ahora sí que...
Well, now it's time to say goodbye. A round of applause, please.
Esa es la noticia mala.
That's the bad news. That was the bad news. But since I have to explain a number of things, let us take a look at the comic strip. But the good news is that Mr. Harari is so generous that he will be here signing his book. If you didn't bring it, if you haven't bought it, you can buy it here, next to the entrance. That's the cartoons, the comic strips, drawn by Enrique. One thing. The technology is not here yet. The interpreter, we don't take home. We don't have an organic simultaneous interpreter with us. So the headsets you've used for simultaneous interpreting, please return them. And then we go to the long queue so that he can sign our book. We are poor Homo sapiens, and we are now beginning to bridge a gap that we have created ourselves. But I still have one certainty, and that certainty is that good books are those that give us answers to questions, but open the door to new questions, and which make us wonder about new things. This is Homo Deus us from Mr. Harari. I'm so grateful. Thank you very much indeed for your time here today, responding to the question, opening the door to new questions, helping us learn who we are. Thank you very much indeed.